Every story hides a secret. Welcome to Silent Revenge Stories. They say ignorance is bliss, but sometimes ignorance is a slow, suffocating death. For me, the bliss ended the moment my son-in-law Marcus smiled across the polished restaurant table and spoke of crochet classes. It was a cold, calculated smile, perfectly crafted to mask the serpent beneath. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 72 years old, a widow of 2 years, and the former CEO of Vance Enterprises, a textile manufacturing company I built from the ground up with my late husband, Arthur. My wealth was considerable, my reputation impeccable, and my family, my only daughter, Simone, and her husband, Marcus, were supposed to be my comfort in my golden years. Instead, they became my executioners. The lunch invitation had seemed innocent enough. "Mama, we haven't had a proper lunch together in ages." Simone had chirped over the phone, her voice overly sweet, a tone I'd learned to dread. Just us. To catch up. We met at the Gilded Spoon, a ridiculously expensive French restaurant that was far too fussy for my taste. But Simone loved it, and I loved Simone, so I indulged her. The conversation flowed, light and superficial, about their children, my grandchildren, whom I rarely saw, their latest lavish vacation, which I, of course, funded, and Marcus's latest brilliant but perpetually unsuccessful business venture. Then, halfway through the main course, Marcus leaned forward, his smile widening. "Eleanor," he began, his voice oozing with what he clearly thought was charm. "Simone and I have been doing a lot of thinking about your future, about making sure comfortable." A prickle of unease started in my gut. I had seen this look before, heard this tone. It was the precursor to a demand, disguised as concern. "We found the most wonderful place," he continued, oblivious to my growing apprehension. "It's called Sunset Meadows. It's an assisted living facility, top-notch, beautiful grounds. They even have crochet classes, Eleanor. You'd just love it." The words hit me like a physical blow. A nursing home. A place for the old, the infirm, the forgotten. He was not talking about comfort. He was talking about confinement. I looked at Simone, my daughter, the woman I had carried, nurtured, and loved unconditionally. Her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. She knew. She was in on it. "A nursing home, Marcus?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Are you suggesting I need to move into a nursing home?" "Oh, Mama, darling," Simone interjected, finally finding her voice, though it was thin and reedy. "It's not a nursing home, it's a retirement community. It's for your own good. You're alone in that big house. It's too much for you. We worry." "Worry about what, Simone?" I asked, my gaze piercing. "My health is excellent. My mind is as sharp as ever. My house is perfectly managed by my staff. What exactly is the problem here?" "The problem, Eleanor," Marcus cut in, his false charm melting away, replaced by thinly veiled impatience, "is that the house is a huge asset, and it's just sitting there, doing nothing. Think of the capital we could free up. For your future care, of course. My future care." The coded language was unmistakable. They weren't worried about my comfort. They were worried about their inheritance. They wanted my house, my money, my life, and they wanted me conveniently out of the way. The cold, hard truth of their betrayal settled over me like a shroud. "You're planning to sell my house," I stated. Not a question, but a chilling declaration. Marcus smiled again, a predatory glint in his eyes. Well, it's a logical step, isn't it? The market is hot. We could get a fantastic price. And with you safely ensconced at Sunset Meadows, it would be much simpler. Simpler for whom, Marcus? I asked, my voice now a whisper of ice. For you and Simone to count the money. Money you believe is already yours. Simone finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a strange mix of guilt and avarice. Mama, it's not like that. It's for us to manage your estate properly. For our future. And the kids' future. Our future. I repeated, my gaze sweeping between them. Lingering on the expensive watch on Marcus's wrist, the designer bag at Simone's feet. These were not the struggles of a family in need, but the demands of a family consumed by greed. They saw me as a bank account, an obstacle to their lavish desires. And in that moment, the loving mother died. The ruthless CEO, the woman who had fought tooth and nail to build her empire, was reborn. Thank you for lunch, I said, rising from the table, my composure unshakable. And thank you for your thoughtful consideration of my future. I pulled out my wallet, laid a crisp $50 bill on the table for my share, and walked out of the restaurant without another word. As I drove away, my mind was already racing. They thought I was an old woman whose mind was failing, easily manipulated into a nursing home while they plundered my assets. They thought I hadn't noticed the years of escalating demands, the thinly veiled contempt, the way my calls were rarely returned unless they needed something. They were about to learn that Eleanor Vance was not just an old woman. She was a force of nature, and she was about to unleash a storm they would never forget. My first call was to Elijah Sterling, my late husband's and my longtime lawyer. He was a man of integrity, discretion, and an almost psychic understanding of human nature. Elijah, I said, my voice calm, belying the fury simmering beneath. They've made their move. They want me in a nursing home, and they want my house. I knew this day would come, Eleanor, Elijah sighed. Arthur foresaw it. He put provisions in place for exactly this scenario. Arthur, my brilliant, prescient husband. He had seen the subtle shift in Simone, the parasitic nature of Marcus, long before I had. His will was not as straightforward as it seemed. There were layers, hidden clauses, and a definitive strategy for what would happen if his beloved wife was ever treated as anything less than she deserved. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone with Elijah, meticulously outlining my counterattack. The plan was intricate, far-reaching, and utterly devastating. It would not only strip them of their ill-gotten gains, but expose the true depths of their avarice to themselves and, ultimately, to the world. First, Elijah was to secure an immediate, comprehensive audit of all my personal and corporate accounts, as well as those of Simone and Marcus. I knew they had been slowly siphoning funds, but I wanted irrefutable proof. Second, he was to prepare a new will for me, one that left absolutely nothing to Simone or Marcus. Nothing, instead. My entire fortune was to be directed to a foundation for young, aspiring textile entrepreneurs in Arthur's name. Third, and most crucially, I told him, prepare for my disappearance. Elijah, tonight, I need to be gone before they make their next move. I returned to my grand, elegant home, the house they coveted so desperately. My staff, loyal and discreet, were already making preparations under Elijah's quiet instructions. The process was seamless, almost clinical. I packed a single, small suitcase with essentials. My most cherished photos of Arthur and my true memories, not the distorted ones with Simone, went into a secure box as night fell. I walked through the quiet rooms of my house, touching the furniture, the books, the artwork. It wasn't a sad farewell. It was a liberation. I was leaving behind not just a house, but a lifetime of expectations, disappointments, and the ghosts of a family that no longer existed. The next morning, as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, I was already at the private airstrip. A sleek, small jet waited, its engines humming softly. My new passport, in my maiden name of Eleanor Vance, felt surprisingly natural in my hand. My destination was a small, secluded island in the Caribbean, a place I owned, a place no one knew about, a place where I could rebuild my life. Far from the reach of greed and betrayal, I imagined Simone and Marcus waking up in their opulent home, perhaps even making a triumphant call to the Sunset Meadows to finalize my placement. They would be congratulating themselves, perhaps even planning how to spend the money from my house. But as they slept, while they were counting money from selling my stuff, I was already on a one-way flight, and they had no idea what kind of storm was brewing. For my daughter and her husband, the day began with the smug satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. They woke up in their lavish home, the future glittering before them. The Eleanor problem, as I later learned Marcus called me, was solved. They imagined me in my big, empty house, sadly packing my crochet needles. Resigned to my fate at Sunset Meadows, their first call of the day was not to me, but to a high-end estate agent, a shark named Gregory, who specialized in fast, high-profit sales in wealthy neighborhoods. "Gregory, it's Marcus Thorne," he'd said, his voice brimming with unearned authority. "We're ready to move on my mother-in-law's property, the big one on Hillcrest Drive. She's finally agreed to downsize. We want it on the market by the end of the week." They spent the morning counting their chickens, sketching out renovation plans on a notepad. They'd gut the library my Arthur had so lovingly built, turn my garden into an infinity pool, and flip the house for a multi-million-dollar profit. Their greed was a blueprint for the desecration of my life's memories. The first hint that their perfect day was about to unravel came around noon. Simone, feeling magnanimous, decided to make a welfare check call. She wanted to hear my defeated voice to confirm her victory. My phone, however, went straight to a crisp, automated message. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected." A flicker of annoyance, not concern, crossed her face. She tried my line. It rang and rang, unanswered. "She's probably just being dramatic," Marcus scoffed, not looking up from his laptop where he was browsing luxury sports cars. "Give her a few hours to sulk. Let's go over the auction list." The auction list was for the contents of my home. My furniture, my art, the antique grandfather clock that had been in Arthur's family for generations. They had already had it all appraised, like vultures circling a kiln. They spent the next hour assigning dollar values to my life's possessions. By late afternoon, a sliver of real unease had begun to creep in. It wasn't concern for my well-being, but the logistical annoyance of a plan hitting a snag. "This is ridiculous," Simone said, pacing her marble living room. "I'm going to go over there. She's probably locked herself in, refusing to come out. I'll have to talk some sense into her." When they pulled their gleaming black SUV up to my house, they found the grand iron gates chained and padlocked. A large, official-looking sign was zip-tied to the bars. It read, private property, nitrogen monoxide, trespassing, under 24-hour surveillance, Van Sterling security. Their confusion morphed into anger. Who was Van Sterling security? How had I managed this? They rattled the gates like petulant children locked out of a candy store. This is absurd. Marcus fumed, pulling out his phone. I'm calling the police. She's clearly had some kind of breakdown. We'll tell them she's an endangered elderly person. They'll break the gate down. But before he could dial, a sleek black town car pulled up beside them. The back window glided down, revealing the calm, impassive face of Elijah Sterling. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Marcus, Elijah said, his voice cool and even. Filing a false police report is a serious offense. Elijah, what is the meaning of this? Simone demanded. Where is my mother? Has she lost her mind? On the contrary, Simone, Elijah replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. Your mother has never been of sounder mind. She is simply retired, and she has asked not to be disturbed. Retired? What are you talking about? We had lunch yesterday. We made plans. Marcus sputtered. You made assumptions, Marcus. Elijah corrected him. Mrs. Vance has left the country for an extended, indefinite period. She has also, as of this morning, placed all of her assets, including this house and everything in it, into a newly formed irrevocable trust. I am the executor. The words hit them like a ton of bricks. Irrevocable trust. Executor. This was a language of financial power, they understood, but it was being used against them. You can't do that. Marcus yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. We have power of attorney. We are in control of her estate. The power of attorney you hold, Elijah said, his voice dropping to a steely tone, pertains to Mrs. Vance's personal accounts, which, as of 9 a.m. this morning, have a combined balance of precisely $0. The trust, however, is a separate legal entity, completely beyond your reach. The security company works for the trust. This house belongs to the trust. You are trespassing. Elijah gestured to the sign. I suggest you leave. Now. He raised the window and the car silently pulled away, leaving them standing on the curb. Utterly defeated and bewildered, they drove home in a stunned, furious silence. Their immediate problem was no longer about a delayed inheritance. It was about survival. The lavish lifestyle they had built was funded by a river of gold that had just been dammed. Permanently back in their mansion, the reality began to set in. They logged into their bank accounts, their faces growing paler with each refresh. The generous allowance I had provided for years was gone. The corporate credit cards from Vance Enterprises, which they used for everything from groceries to jewelry, were all declined. The financial ecosystem that had supported their fantasy had collapsed overnight. She can't do this. Simone wailed, throwing her phone onto a silk sofa. This is our money. Dad wanted us to have it. It was never your money, Simone, Marcus snapped, his fear making him cruel. It was always hers. We were just living on her charity, and you with your endless spending. You pushed her too far. Me, she shrieked back. You were the one talking about crochet classes. You were the one who couldn't wait to sell the house. The blame game began, the ugly, panicked unraveling of a partnership built on nothing but greed. They were trapped in a gilded cage of their own making, and now the food had run out. For the next few weeks, they lived in a state of escalating panic. They tried to find me, but it was impossible. Elijah had erased my existence with the precision of a master spy. There was no flight manifest, no forwarding address, no digital footprint. I was a ghost. Their lives began to publicly fray at the edges. They had to fire their housekeeper. The gardener stopped coming. They received a warning from their children's elite private school for overdue tuition. Their social circle, a fair-weather flock, began to distance themselves. Smelling the stench of financial failure, their desperation led them to a new, even uglier plan. If they couldn't find me, they would have me declared legally incompetent. They would argue that my sudden disappearance and the transfer of all my assets into a trust were clear signs of a deteriorating mind, manipulated by a predatory lawyer. They would petition the court to have me declared a ward of the state, with them appointed as my legal guardians, thereby giving them control of the trust. When Elijah informed me of this move via our secure satellite phone, I wasn't surprised. It was the predictable next step for a cornered rat. Let them, Elijah, I said, sipping a cool drink on my private beach. Let them file the papers. Let them build their case. Give them enough rope. They're gathering evidence, Eleanor, he warned. They're getting statements from concerned friends about how confused and grief-stricken you've been. They're painting a picture. I know, I said, a cold smile on my face. And when the time is right, I will come back and show the court what the real picture looks like. The court hearing was set. They arrived looking somber and concerned, the perfect picture of a worried family. They had their lawyer, their doctored statements, and their story of a beloved mother who had tragically lost her way. They felt confident. They believed they were about to regain control. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Judge Harriet Peterson, listened to their lawyer lay out the case. He spoke of my erratic behavior, my sudden flight, my vulnerability to the influence of Mr. Sterling. It was a compelling performance. And where is your mother now? Judge Peterson asked Simone directly. We don't know, Your Honor, Simone said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. She just vanished. We are so terribly worried. We just want to find her and make sure she's safe and being cared for. The judge looked over at Elijah. Mr. Sterling, you are the executor of this trust. Do you know the whereabouts of Mrs. Vance? Elijah stood up. I do, Your Honor. And is she, in your opinion, mentally competent? She is not only competent, Your Honor, Elijah said, his voice ringing with conviction. She is in complete and total control. In fact, she is here today. A gasp went through the small courtroom. Simone and Marcus whipped their heads around, their eyes scanning the gallery in a panic. The main courtroom doors opened, and I walked in. The courtroom doors swung shut behind me with a heavy, final thud. Every eye was on me. I was no longer a name on a legal document or a phantom in a sad story. I was a reality they could not ignore. Simone stared, her mouth agape, her face a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. Marcus looked like he had seen a ghost. His carefully constructed narrative of the confused, vulnerable mother had just been incinerated by my very presence. I walked slowly, deliberately, to the front of the courtroom, my gaze fixed on Judge Peterson. I was not the frail old woman they had described. I was tan, my back was straight, and my eyes held the clarity of a woman who had spent the last 3 months in the sun. Planning their destruction, Mrs. Vance, the judge said, her stern expression giving way to intrigued curiosity. Your children have filed a petition expressing grave concern for your well-being. They believe you are not of sound mind to manage your affairs. What say you?" I stood beside Elijah, my hands clasped calmly in front of me. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and resonant, filling the silent room. "I am not here today to prove my competence. I am here to expose a crime. My erratic behavior was a response to a betrayal. My disappearance was not an act of confusion. It was a strategic retreat. I turned my gaze upon my daughter and her husband. 3 months ago, my children invited me to lunch. It was there that my son-in-law, with my daughter's silent consent, informed me that they had chosen a nursing home for me, a place with crochet classes. They told me it was time for me to be put away so they could sell my home and free up the capital. They saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle to their inheritance. A murmur went through the courtroom. Judge Peterson's eyes narrowed, her focus shifting from me to them. When I realized they were planning to strip me of my home, my assets, and my dignity, I continued. I chose to act, not as a victim, but as the CEO of Vance Enterprises, a company I built with my husband from nothing. I did not run away, Your Honor. I relocated to a secure location to protect my assets from these two predators. This is a lie. Marcus suddenly shouted, jumping to his feet. She's twisting everything. We were concerned. Were you, Marcus? Elijah interjected, stepping forward and placing a thick binder on the judge's bench. This is the audit I conducted, Your Honor, at Mrs. Vance's request. It details years of allowances given to Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, totaling over $2 million. It also details the contracts they had already drawn up with auction houses to sell the contents of Mrs. Vance's home contracts dated the day before they took her to that fateful lunch. The judge opened the binder, her expression hardening with every page she turned. The evidence of their premeditated greed was undeniable. They did not see a mother in need of care, I said, my voice ringing with a righteous fury I had held back for years. They saw a vault they were impatient to crack open. When they discovered I had secured my fortune, they didn't try to find me out of love. They filed this petition out of desperation. This hearing is not about my mental health. It is their final, pathetic attempt to get their hands on money they believe they are entitled to. I then delivered the final blow, not just to their case, but to their entire sense of self. My husband, Arthur, was a brilliant man. He saw this coming. His will contains specific provisions, what he called a legacy mandate. It stipulates that if his heirs ever prioritize personal greed over the family's core values of integrity and hard work, the bulk of his estate is to be redirected. I looked out at the courtroom, then back at the judge. Your Honor, I am not some confused old woman. I am the executor of my husband's true legacy. And 3 months ago, I made the decision to honor his mandate. I have spent my time away not in a state of decline, but in a state of creation. I have established the Arthur Vance Foundation for Young Entrepreneurs, a multi-million-dollar charitable trust dedicated to funding the next generation of business leaders. The courtroom was silent. Simone had collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with sobs of pure, unadulterated shame. Marcus stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and utter ruin. He hadn't just lost the money. He had been publicly exposed as a parasite, a man who tried to steal from a widow to fund his own pathetic ambitions. Judge Peterson closed the binder with a sharp thud that echoed like a gavel. She looked at Marcus and Simone with a gaze of pure, icy contempt. This court has heard enough, she said. The petition for guardianship is dismissed. with extreme prejudice. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. You are fortunate that Mrs. Vance has chosen not to press criminal charges for attempted fraud and elder abuse. I suggest you both reflect long and hard on the depths of your depravity. Get out of my courtroom. They stumbled out, not as a power couple, but as two disgraced individuals, their reputations shattered in a single brutal hour. The reporters in the hallway swarmed them, but they had no words, no defense. Their public execution was complete. That was the last time I saw Marcus. I heard he and Simone divorced within weeks. He was ruined, a social and financial pariah. He left the city, a ghost, haunted by the fortune he had so foolishly tried to seize life. For me, found a new, beautiful rhythm. I sold the big house on Hillcrest, the one filled with so many painful memories. With the proceeds, I bought a quiet, elegant penthouse overlooking the city and dedicated my every waking hour to the foundation. I was no longer a widow in the shadows. I was a philanthropist, a mentor, a queen in a new kingdom of my own making. About a year later, I received a letter. It was from Simone. It was short, the handwriting shaky. She wasn't asking for money or forgiveness. She was just reporting. She had a job as a waitress. She was living in a small apartment. She was paying her own bills for the first time in her life. She wrote about her children, how she was trying to teach them the value of $1, the value of honesty, or the things she had forgotten. The last line read, "I finally understand what Dad meant when he said, the heaviest thing you can carry is an unearned $1. I hope one day I can be a person you would be proud to know." I didn't write back, not then. Redemption, I knew, was a long, solitary road. She had to walk it herself, but my grandchildren, they were another matter. Through Elijah, I arranged for a separate, anonymous trust to fund their education, ensuring they would never have to pay for their parents' mistakes. Today, my life is full, not with the noise of a family that saw me as a means to an end, but with the quiet satisfaction of a purpose fulfilled. The young entrepreneurs we fund are building amazing things, creating jobs and honoring Arthur's legacy in a way my own daughter never could. Sometimes, when I look out from my penthouse at the city lights, I think about that lunch at the Gilded Spoon. I think about the cruel smile and the talk of crochet classes. They thought they were sending me to my end. They had no idea they were just sending me to my beginning. Did you like my story? I'd love to know what you think and which city you're listening from. Please let me know in the comments. If you want to support my work so I can keep bringing you more stories like this, you can send a super thanks. Your support means the world to me. On the screen now are 2 more stories I think you'll love. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more. Until next time.